Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 446, written by eyebrowswhere? The Mystery of the Immortal Jack Miller. Through all of middle school, there was a kid in my grade named Jack Miller. Jack was your typical high school nerd stereotype. Rectangular glasses, acne, shaggy brown hair, a small circle of similar friends who he primarily hung around. You get the picture. One particular thing about him is that he always wore sweatpants. Some kids actually had made fun of him for it because he would always, every day of middle school, come to school wearing those loose-fitting straight-leg sweatpants you often see kids wearing. These are important details for later. One day, during the summer after 8th grade, all the parents of kids in my grade got an email stating that Jack Miller had tragically passed away in an accident. Naturally, my parents, and presumably many other parents in town, sat down with their kids and informed us all of what had happened, and why our classmate would not be returning to school in September. Being as though this was during the early days of Facebook, a myriad of RIP Jack Miller posts started to circle our community's Facebook page. Parents, teachers, classmates of his all posted about what a tragedy it was and how he would be so dearly missed and whatnot. I myself had a friend whose mom was close friends with and worked with Jack's mom in the same hospital, and we all got the grisly details of what exactly happened to him. This happened as a result of my friend picking up the second landline in her house one day and overhearing a conversation between her mom and Jack's mom. It was terrible, and all of my classmates felt so bad for his sister, who was a few grades below us, and the rest of his family. Fast forward to September of 9th grade. The sun is shining, girls are getting dress coded for their off-the-shoulder tops, freshmen such as myself are struggling to figure out how to open their lockers, etc. I'm sitting in the homeroom waiting for my name to be called when all of a sudden the teacher reads from her roster. Jack Miller. I sit up in my seat, confused, and look around the room to find many other confused faces. The girl next to me whispers, "I thought he died in August," and I reply, "I know, what the—" "Here," says a voice from the back row. I turned around in utter shock and confusion because right there, sitting 2 rows from the left back row, was Jack. Many other kids did the exact same thing, and after a few seconds, nearly every eye in the room was pointed at a kid who responds to the name Jack, who had shaggy brown hair, rectangular glasses, acne, who was also wearing a pair of ill-fitting sweatpants. He looked identical to Jack Miller and was even wearing the iconic sweatpants we had all known Jack to wear every day. He looked confused as to why everyone was looking at him. The teacher went on, reading names from the roster, looking visibly confused herself. Eventually, lunch came around, and I saw that many of my classmates had sought out this Jack Miller and were bombarding him with questions. "We all thought you died. What the hell? How are you here right now? You're dead. Why is your last name different than last year?" Jack Miller responded to these questions with the following explanation. He said, "I'm not sure what you're talking about, but I just transferred here because my parents and I moved here from XYZ town, about 20 minutes away. My name's always been Jack Miller, and I'm not sure what you're talking about or why everyone's acting so weird. I'm alive and standing here right now, of course." Eventually, this had become such an odd, talked about phenomenon that the principal stepped in a few days later and addressed our grade in an assembly. The abridged version of what he said was, "I know a lot of you are confused about our new student, Jack Miller, because of what happened in August. Jack Miller passed away in an accident over the summer, and we just so happen to have a new student here this year with a very similar name and similar appearance. I don't want any more talk about this matter, as it is settled." So basically, the principal had told us all that it was just some wild coincidence that this new kid looks exactly like the kid who died, who some of my classmates had spent grades K through 8 with every day. Something just didn't add up though. This new Jack looked exactly like the other one. If he wasn't the same person, then he was a spot-on doppelganger of the original Jack, down to minor details like the shape of his glasses, acne, hair color, clothes, and overall appearance. They were even the same height, for Christ's sake. I changed the names for privacy, but in real life, this new kid had the exact same first name, and his last name was literally 1 letter off from the original kid. So life went on as normal, but all these years later, I still find myself wondering what the hell that was all about, And what a major coincidence it would have been for this to happen. Any thoughts are appreciated on this matter, but I believe that somehow, some wires had to have been crossed in the universe to result in this humongous coincidence. Answering a few questions. Yes, Jack Miller's obituary is online. I just looked it up, and the date of his death was back when I was in 8th, going into 9th grade. No, I will not be sharing the details of his death because of the disturbing nature of how he died, and out of respect for his family. Just know it's one of the worst, most humiliating ways to die and be remembered by. I have heard/thought about his death being faked for whatever reason, then him just returning to school as normal. One of you said it would be the worst witness protection program in history, which is funny, but the facts are that Jack Miller died when I was in middle school, and Jack Miller is a very real person who exists and is alive. I just looked up his Facebook page and he's still active on it. I was able to find pictures of both Jacks. One picture is from Jack Miller's obituary, the other is from Jack Miller's Facebook page, but his earliest picture on there is from when we graduated high school. That being said, Jack Miller just looks like how Jack Miller would have grown up to look. They have near identical features. Their real first name is much less common than Jack. It's a name I've only heard a few times, and I've only ever met these two people with that name in my life. So that was another reason why it was so weird. Case file number 447, written by Anonymous. Mystery of coordinated teeth brushing. So this happened a few years ago. I'm in college now. I still think back on it and laugh because of how weird the situation was. I got my license when I was a senior in high school, a lot later than my peers, because I had crazy anxiety and driving made it worse, and I hated showing up to school sweaty. Eventually I had to get it because I would stay later after school and my mom didn't want to drive to pick up my sister, then me later in 2 separate trips. This particular day, I was driving to school alone for the first time because I had stayed home from school until after lunch at about 2 p.m. due to a doctor's appointment. It usually took me about 10 to 15-ish minutes from my house to school depending on traffic, and on the way there were a couple of 4-way stop sign intersections and light intersections. When I pulled up to the first 4-way stop intersection, a car coming from the left stop sign passed in front of me, and the man driving the car was straight up brushing his teeth with a large white electric toothbrush. I thought this was hilarious looking, and I remembered it because I could tell I had the same toothbrush even from far away. I was just so familiar with it. It was so funny at the time because I grew up watching Mr. Bean, and I remember an episode where he brushed his teeth in the car. I continued to drive to school and came up to the final stoplight intersection where I had a red light. That's when I saw a man driving his car coming from the right through his green light. Completely different person and different car. And he too was brushing his teeth with a big white electric toothbrush. I remember shrieking in my car alone because I was so stunned that I saw 2 people within the span of 5 minutes both brushing their teeth in their cars. When I finally pulled into the school parking lot, I parked in the back row where all of my friends would park. We were all usually late, so ended up there. And I pulled my car into a spot right next to my best friend, who was sitting in his car. And when I put my car in park and looked over at him, he was sitting there brushing his teeth. Mind you, it wasn't an electric toothbrush this time, but still I was sent into oblivion by seeing him there, when he should have been in class, but instead was brushing his teeth. I remember telling people about it for the rest of the day, and after I got home, no one really seemed to believe me or care that that had happened, but I think about it all the time, and it was just such an odd time of day for it to be happening too, that it always stuck with me. Case notes, case file number 447. So this is either the universe's or developer's way of reminding you to keep up to date with your own hygienic routine, or it's subtle evidence that you are in fact in your own version of the Truman Show. The good news is, everyone in your show has excellent breath and beautiful pearly whites. Silver linings, right? Case file number 448, written by JarviScott. The Mystery of Silent, Simultaneous Observance. This happened a couple years ago in Chicago when I was just out of college. I was riding the train to work. Since it was early morning, the train was relatively packed. On the seat by the train door sits this old black man with a cane. He was decently dressed up in slacks and a suit vest, We reach a stop and he gets up to get off the train. Since he's older, he's slow to move and has a bit of a limp. As soon as he gets out of my sight, this different old black man with a cane, also dressed up in slacks and a suit vest, and with a similar limp, comes in and sits in the exact same spot. Now, important to note, they did not look exactly the same or have the same exact clothes, just similar overall. Since he clearly wasn't the same man, I find it somewhat funny, but don't think much of it. That is, until I looked around at the rest of the train. My entire section of the train was just staring at me in silence. My heart skipped a beat hard when I noticed that. It lasted until the door's closing announcer made a comment, and then people went back to their business. Not the most insane story, but it freaked me the hell out.